Okay, hello. So this video is going to be about using the ZWO camera, and in this case ZWO's ASI Studio Suite. Here I'm using ASI cap, it says for planetary imaging, and I'm using it with my ZWO ASI178mc, which is a planetary camera. It's not cooled or anything. And I've got the all sky lens, I think they call it. It's close to being a fisheye, I guess. And one of the reasons I'm trying it out right now is last night, May the 11th, was the day here 2024 that that night the northern lights were supposed to be like the best they'd been in 20 years or something, and I came out to do it, and I've got video of it here and some pictures I'll show you. And tonight it was supposed to maybe happen again. Well, it's May the 12th now. It's Saturday night the 11th, just after midnight, so it's Sunday the 12th, I guess. But last night, this bright area of sky here, this is a northern horizon, my camera's kind of looking straight up, this looks more or less like what I would normally see of brightness. That's just light pollution, I think, from the little town about 5 or 6 miles away. And maybe there's some northern lights sneaking in there too. Last night, at least around 2:30 or 3 in the morning, this light came way up here. Matter of fact, at its best parts, it was like at this area way up here where it was like it was straight up or above me. So since the camera's pointed basically straight up here is the northern horizon. So down here at the bottom is the southern. And it's kind of backwards of what you might think. This here, I believe, is actually the west, and this is the east. And the reason is it's kind of like if you were facing south and then you tried to look straight up. North would be up at the very top. You'd have to kind of bend over backwards to the point that the top of your eyesight was starting to look back down at the ground behind you a little bit. So for that reason, the east and west seems kind of flopped. But I thought, well, I'll make a video just kind of showing how I do this. And I'm not sure, a lot of people, I think, that were buying these cameras for planetary and what have you may not have necessarily used that camera lens that much. I didn't for a while. I played with it, and then I realized, hey, that might really work good for the northern lights, and that was a lucky break. It worked real good. So to begin with, I've just got the camera put on a regular camera tripod. It's got a threaded socket in the back of it. I can show you a picture of it here. And so it's pointed basically straight up, and the USB cable part is coming out on the south side, so I guess that means that's the bottom of the camera, so it's coming out of this end of the camera. And let's see, I've started this up, and I've got it still left on RAW 8. I haven't changed to 16, and this is one of the little weird things I learned about this camera and software. If I leave it on RAW 8, of course it doesn't give you, it's 8 bits what it means instead of 16-bit. So it's a smaller file size in megabytes. And also when I come down here, if I push the video button here as opposed to individual frame shots, it will automatically record in color. So it's kind of like just a standard color camera at that point. You just take a picture, it's point and shoot. And I've learned the hard way that if I put it on 16-bit, which seemed like a good idea, and then did the video, it would give me a black and white video, And I think you can actually fix that in a program called PIP, which is a free program that people use for planetary imaging. And what it amounts to is this camera, rather than just having red, green, and blue sensors, has 2 green for every red and blue, so it's considered RGGB. And I had actually had something like that happen when I was taking pictures of the solar eclipse here back in April here of 2024, because I was lucky enough that where I live was in totality, and I was able to do it in my driveway, and couldn't get any luckier than that, and even had good weather. But anyway, let's see, when I first get started, I've kind of learned this: you have to focus the lens, and so, you know, probably if you do it during the daytime, that would be nice. It would make it easier if you set up while you can still see the sky. Maybe you'll see a few clouds floating over, and you can quickly get it set. And you know, you can manually set your exposure here, or you can even put it on auto, which might be nice during the daytime. But I've learned here at nighttime, at least in this moment, I can set my exposure at 4 seconds and my gain at, that's 398, so about 400, and I get a pretty good exposure. And I've already focused this, but here a couple minutes ago it wasn't quite in focus, and in the center of these bright stars I was seeing a little black dot, and that told me it was off a little bit on focus. If you're off by quite a bit, you know, it'll be a big donut, and you might not notice it at first with a camera like this because you got such a wide view. Because I remember, you know, when I first tried this camera, I was just looking at it like this, kind of all sky, and I thought it's reasonably in focus. And the star Vega happened to be bright and overhead one night, and I was looking at it, and I zoomed in on it, and the thing was a donut. And I'm like, oh no. And when I got it in focus, I started seeing so many more stars at the same exposure. So last night when I was doing my video, I had it at these same settings. So I'd left it on RAW 8 and bin 1, which, you know, full resolution, so it's a 6 megapixel video. And then of course, by the time I do anything with it, I end up being down to 1080 because my monitor's not going to be that big. And then if I post it on YouTube, I haven't posted it as anything bigger than that. So let's see here. So I went 4 seconds and about 400. It just hit at 398. And the capture folder is still set on last night. I'm going to change it to tonight, which I just made another folder. There, it's computer was a little slow there for a second. And where'd it go? Northern Lights, May 12th. Do that, and then the limit, it was still on frames. Last night at the end I was took some pictures with Fitz frames. I'll show you that too in a little bit. And that was when I took dark frames at the end. So I've got it on no limit. And I'll just go ahead and click video. So this should be recording just a standard video file. And we'll let her record for a few seconds. And it's doing a 4-second exposure for each frame. So it doesn't play back at the typical speed that you would expect. It would look more slow motion if you was, or maybe faster motion. Even it wouldn't be right. Because, yeah, it would be faster, I guess, because it would play quicker. So I'll go ahead and hit stop. And then I'm going to bring up that video. And we'll just record it both ways. I'll record it 16-bit and get the black and white that I don't really want. And So this one here is the one where I left it at 8-bit, which at least on my software, that comes up by default. So let's see, I've got a 9-second video. It's 165 megabytes. That's quite a bit. So we'll double click this AVI and play it. And it doesn't look much different than what you saw, but you can see it's got color to it. So that's played. So now I'm going to switch this over to say raw 16. So now it's going to be 16-bit. And it takes a few seconds to refresh here. There we go. So I had to go to the next 4-second exposure. So if you ever set on a long exposure and you go change that, like I said, if you had it set for 30 seconds, you'd have to just sit there for 30 seconds waiting for it to change. Or you could change your exposure time to a much shorter exposure to get it to refresh, and then change it back to where you were. And it's the same if you change the gain. So now we've got it on raw 16. And I'm just going to do the same thing and push the record video. And we'll get a little something here in a minute. Let it record for 10 seconds or so. Okay, so stop. And we'll bring this one up. And, okay, this says it's an SER, which I think Windows can't play it, so I'll have to, I can bring it up in Deep Sky Stacker. And I'll call that up. I think it'll do it. We'll find out. I know I viewed it somehow. Okay. See if it'll find it. It may not even be able to see it. I may have to do it in Registax. I know I've opened them before. I bet I did. Maybe I did it in Registax. Let's bring that up and see if it does it. For some reason I was thinking I used to just double click on them and at least be able to view them. ZWO, which is SER. Okay. Here's a little message that popped up. So this here was the warning that I didn't understand before, I guess. It says debayering 16-bit can only be done using reduction to 8 bits. So what that amounts to is it's going to show up looking really strange, kind of black and white. Click OK, do it. Open. Still giving me the warning. It may, yeah, there it's showing it. I don't know how easy it is to tell there. Actually, it looks like it has a little bit of color. But when I did this before, they turned out black and white, because this is what happened to me, I thought. With the solar, okay, the solar eclipse, if I remember right, I meant to set it on 16-bit, and I did FITS files, and they were at F8. Let's try that. So, they were on RAW 8, Because what happened when I was doing the solar eclipse, at the beginning when I was, ooh, I see some red starting to come up there. When I, so that's northern lights. So when I started, I was having difficulty getting the sun in my telescope, and of course I was starting to try not to panic because it started getting close to time. Check that out. So there are going to get some northern lights activity tonight. So I accidentally left it on raw 8 because I kept starting back and forth when I was trying to get set up. And so let's just go raw 8, and let's just take one fit frame. That's all I need to show this. Click one. So I took a picture. Go find it here. Should be in this other folder. Okay, see, and it says PNG, and I was expecting a fit frame when I did that. And it's 6 megabytes in size, and I think it would have been 12 if it had been a fit frame. And this is all because I had forgot to change it from 8 to 16. So it may be, well, you can see that it's not red like it was in, if we can see here, here's your live view. As you can see here, it's red there down on the northern horizon. And here, I lost my, there it is. Here it's not. There it's gray, so it's actually got black and white. So that's what happened with my solar eclipse images, but I was able to bring them back to color by running it through that PIP program. And I want to do a video about that and show how I correct. Once I figured it out, it wasn't too difficult at all. It just took a few minutes. So we'll turn that off. And now I've got a little bit of northern lights activity. So let's see, I'm on raw 8, which remember I had done by accident at one time. And when I pushed, if I had pushed video instead, I would have just got a color video, which is what I was doing last night. And I tried actually three different settings last night. I did most everything here at 4 seconds at 400 gain. And then I was, just experimenting, thinking, gee, could I have done even better? And I remembered I had done this same thing at about 30 seconds. Just like the first time I'd used it, I'd read in the instructions that you could use a 30-second exposure and still keep your stars reasonably round. And I remembered I'd had the gain lower, and luckily I'd saved it and found them, so I went with 30 seconds and a gain of 100, and then I tried it again with a gain of 80 just to try to make it even less noisy. I just want to see how good a picture I could get, and those worked pretty nice. But then while I was messing around at that time, I was seeing a lot of red, but I wasn't seeing any of these little jets or anything, whatever you want to call them, pillars, shooting up. So I wasn't sure if I needed to change something on my exposure, because I really didn't have any experience with northern lights. I'd seen them before, and while I'm mentioning it, if you've never seen them, like tonight, the sky when I walked out here, it looked more or less normal. And last night it did too. Last night it was brighter. I knew that this area down here was brighter and it was coming up. Because here normally where I live, I can see, I think, yeah, this here I believe is Polaris. So you got your Big Dipper here. And these are your pointer stars, pointing right to Polaris. So this is the Little Dipper. This is coming up the handle. And then you have your 4 stars of the bowl of the Little Dipper. And if you haven't heard this part before, As far as these 4 stars, one of them is about magnitude 2, same as Polaris. Another one's magnitude 3, another one's magnitude 4, and the other one's magnitude 5. And that's kind of a neat way to make a quick reference of how your skies are. And of course, it helps if this is up higher. So if I can see all 4, then I figure, well, I can see 5th magnitude. Now, since this Little Dipper bowl here kind of travels around in a circle around Polaris, sometimes it's down low here in this. And when it is, that part of the sky is bright anyway, so I can't really use that as a good reference. If you know, but on a night like tonight where it's up high, I could use it easier to see if I'm seeing stuff at magnitude 4 or magnitude 5. Let's see, so I'm going to start, I'm debating here whether to start recording that right now. It's not doing much. But when I was playing around last night, like I said, I wasn't real sure about my settings, and this bright glow was coming up. And you saw how red that was a minute or 2 ago. It was really red, but it wasn't dancing around or anything. And then I happened to change it back to this numbers here, the 4-second and 400 gain. And I started seeing stuff on here. It was just looked amazing. I was seeing those little bright beams of light coming up. And then I walked away from the monitor and got to where I could kind of see a little bit of night vision again. And after a few seconds, I could see this again. And to the naked eye, this all just looked gray. It just looked like regular old light pollution. It was just brighter than usual, since I, do this from the same location here at my house. I know that the little town of Riley isn't going to be any brighter from one night to the next normally. There's no reason for it to be. And that night it was coming way up, so I knew, okay, it had to be northern lights. And then I started seeing, they looked kind of like beams of light. They'd go way up, and you'd just see them, and it might stay there for several seconds. But it would look gray to me. Now online, I've heard some people said they saw some color, with their naked eye. That's one thing that's confusing when you see people's pictures online of the northern lights and stuff, and sometimes, they got all these reds and greens and they're dancing around. And whenever I've seen the northern lights, like I remember seeing them in Canada once when I was on a fishing trip, and I could just barely see some green. And I could kind of tell that they were moving around a little. And of course that was back before I had all this camera set up. It's been a good 20 plus years ago, and I got to see them. But there was supposed to have been a chance to see northern lights here, I guess within the last year. I don't remember exactly when it was. But I had a nice clear dark night, and I was out here trying to see them. And I didn't really know what to expect, and I couldn't see anything, and I'd heard that some people were seeing this stuff. And I was thinking, well, maybe the fact that I've got this town up here to the north and giving me a glow is just making it harder for me. So I just drove down the road out east 2 or 3 miles and got to an area when I looked north out into the country that instead of looking up towards the town, I was looking to a darker area. And I stopped for a minute since it was late and there wasn't any traffic, and I got out and looked. And I mean, I could just barely get a hint that something was going on. Which I would say tonight, if I was able to see it, if I was sitting there watching, if you were in your lawn chair just sitting there looking at the sky in the dark, watching the stars, you'd probably notice if you were looking for them that, hey, it got a little brighter over here for a minute, and maybe you'd see a little beam of light show up, and it'd look almost like, well, somebody's out there with a spotlight. But it was this. Okay, so here is my little
ZWO ASI178mc camera, and there's the little fisheye lens of sort that came with it. They call it an all sky, I guess. And you can just turn that collar there to adjust your focus. And once I got it close, I figured out that I needed to go counterclockwise. That's one of the things, kind of start and see if I'm going the right direction or not. And I was once I got close, I was trying to make the absolute smallest move I could possibly make. Because if you go too far, then you can get, it just gets confusing.
Well, I guess one thing you'd have to think about is why do you want to, some people, like say, aren't even interested in using this all sky thing. But some people use it for meteorites. So if you're wanting to record meteors, I've tried it once during a meteor shower, and I guess you learn from your mistakes. And one of the first things I learned was I needed to use a really high gain, so maybe even go as high as 500 all the way. I think it goes to 510 or something, and then shorten the exposure down. And I think there's an airplane going across there right now. So that's not a meteor. A meteor would be a quick streak. But if, say, the meteor was a really bright one, let's say it's as bright as, I believe this is Arcturus, that's around, it might be magnitude 0. So this is showing up easily with a 4-second exposure, but it's holding still. So if you have something that streaks across that quick, and especially if you're doing a long exposure, if you were thinking like what I was earlier where I was talking about 30-second exposure, the meteor wouldn't even show up. So if you want to try this during a meteor shower, I would suggest going with as much gain as you can and as short of exposure as you can, and try that, and then you can play around with it and see if you want to back off a little bit. And I'm sure there's some people that are really a lot more experienced about it than I am, that would have better information. But that's definite. Because the meteor, it may only last, most of them only last like a second or so. A really good one that streaks way across the sky might last a second and a half, 2 seconds. And then occasionally where you see on the news where somebody saw a fireball, which was just amazing and lit up the whole sky, that might have lasted 5 seconds. But normally they're very short, and a lot of them, something, let's say something as bright as Arcturus or Vega or something very bright, those are the really good ones. A lot of them are considerably fainter, but if you're in a dark spot, you can see them easy. And it's kind of a trick to get your camera to see those. I think, like I say, you just need a lot of gain. And this could be fun to do to, say, you just want to make a time lapse, especially if it's a night where there's a few clouds floating by and you're figuring, well, you can't see any galaxies very good or photograph them tonight anyway. You can watch things rising over here and setting as it goes. So if you had several hours, you'd get it going across, and then maybe you'd have some clouds blowing by. And one night when I did it, there was a thunderstorm starting to come in, but there were still some stars here. If I find the video, I'll put it up there. I think I might still have it. But I was, had a few stars and was seeing clouds blowing by, and every now and then you'd see a bright flash of lightning. And then, of course, I put it all up as soon as it started to barely sprinkle, because when I was doing it this time, I'm sitting in my driveway, and I'm just a few feet from my garage door. So that night, as soon as I knew it was starting to rain, I had it undercover in the garage within a few seconds. So it's nice for that. And this would be, I think it'd be interesting to do during the daytime too. And then you could decide, obviously you'd just be using like standard camera settings like you would with any other camera. So you could probably put it on auto, and then if you wanted to play with it, fine. But it's nice for that. It's a way to, it's kind of neat, to be able to show things going across the sky. And then if you do that, let's say you have a real nice night like tonight, and you just decide that you want to sit out here the whole night. And then let's say, I think it's Vega here coming up in the east at bright blue, so it's going to come across up here overnight and then go way over here to the west. And so if I was doing 4-second exposures and left it recording, I mean, it would be such a huge file, because last night I recorded I think it was a 36-minute video. I'll bring it up while I'm thinking about it. And I think it was almost 10 gigabytes, and that was at 8-bit. So, Northern Lights, the 11th. Share videos. Yeah, see, I got one here. It says 10.206. At first I thought that was 10 gigabytes. Apparently it's 9.73. It's down here at the bottom. But that was just in 36 minutes. If you're wanting to sit out here for several hours, then you want to take that into account. And one way to take care of that would be to just go with longer exposures. Now in this case, of course, I'm putting it on a fixed tripod. And I've even thought about, what if you put it on something like a Star Tracker or anything where you had it even close to polar aligned, and you could take considerably longer exposures, and then it would be a lot easier to get really nice images of the Milky Way going across the sky. But see, apparently if I go over 30 seconds, everything starts streaking here. And then also, if I start changing everything, the trees will start moving, but I can get over that if what I really wanted was the Milky Way. So I haven't tried that yet, but that's one thing I've been thinking about doing, was setting up my telescope, put this camera on a piggyback, basically pointing straight up, and just let the telescope track. And then I could use a lot longer exposures, and I would have my gain way down. But as long as I'm playing here, I'll go ahead and I'm going to set this gain down to about 100. So we'll get there, 100, and I'm going to go up to 30 seconds. And you can see I'm counting down my exposure time up here. So right now it's showing black because it's completely refreshing. So since I changed the exposure and the gain, I just got to wait. So that's something to, if you're doing a really long exposure and you don't want to wait to refresh, but you could shorten it and then start it back up. Now we've got a 30-second, and it's really, there's not much Big Dipper showing up, but this isn't processed either. I haven't tried to stretch it. I've got it on 8-bit. Which I don't think I've noticed any difference on the view between 8-bit and 16-bit. It makes a difference when you start stretching the image. When I'm doing, like if I'm taking pictures of galaxies or something through telescope, I definitely set it on that. And I can show you. I'd already closed that folder. I'll show you from last night. I did the 30-second one. I took a few pictures and they turned out pretty nice. So, let's see. Number 11. 30 seconds, gain of 81. That's the TIFF. Let's see. Okay, here's the. Oh, I'll open that up too. See what it. So this is the TIFF. So this hasn't really been processed. Maybe a little, you can see that. And then let's see what happens after I, same thing, I ran it in through GIMP, did some stretching. See if, yeah, see how you can shows a lot more. You can see how much brighter it was last night than tonight. This here was like 2:30 in the morning, so right now it's 1 a.m. So it was like 2:30 or even 3 a.m. maybe. And the Big Dipper's way over here, and part of it's starting to go into the tree. And this is Vega. And I think that's Arcturus over there. But you can see last night, everything was coming up, and the sky was a lot brighter. Like I said, I wasn't, even with all this red and stuff, I couldn't see color. Now, when it was coming up here and you get kind of these bright streaks or pillars or beams or whatever, I could see those. And they would be up there for several seconds. You might see that up there 5, 10, 20, 30 seconds, whatever. And then it might change. And it just might disappear, or it might move over sideways. Let's bring up my little 1-minute video I made. So here, this says 4-second exposures video. And we'll bring this up. Okay, so now what I've done here, I've turned this into a time lapse. So this video lasts 1 minute and 7 seconds. But I spent 36 minutes recording 4-second exposures, just like I had it set on here a minute ago. But you can see when you get these really bright beams, I could see that quite easy. But like I say, I wasn't seeing any color. Some people may have. But I was really happy that I managed to get this, and I think a lot of that was luck. I just happened to be out here and had everything set up, and all I had to do was say wow and push record and let it do its thing. So fortunately I was already ready. And at one point I was wondering if this stuff here was still part of the northern lights, or if a few thin clouds blew over and got illuminated. But I've seen a lot of other people's pictures online and videos online, and I think that may have actually been northern lights. So you can see right here, since this isn't processed, it's 30 seconds at 100, looks like nothing. And the one picture I just showed you a minute ago is 36 at 81, so a little less gain, and when I stretched it I was able to get it. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to where I was, at about 400 anyway. We can even that. And now since I've got it on 1-second exposure, that's refreshed quick. And you don't see it counting down up there when you have it on 1, or if you've got it on a really short exposure, you won't see it counting that stuff. So take her back up to 4 seconds. And who knows, maybe, I showed you here a few minutes ago, it suddenly started turning red, and now it's kind of back to normal. Let's see, when I was watching the weather forecast earlier this week, I was didn't know that I was going to have a legitimate opportunity for the northern lights, and I was thinking, it's supposed to be clear Saturday night, and I was thinking about what to take pictures of. And I was thinking late at night, M13 comes along, and it's over here. I'm wondering if I've got this. Is it bright enough? Why don't I see Vega? Well, it should be bright enough. It's just behind the tree. But it's trying to find the keystone of Hercules. There it is. Right there. Not very easy to see on this right at the second. We can bring up the game. Just here playing anyway. Accidentally closed that one. 450 or so. Over there. A few seconds there, it brightened up. And of course, when you're looking at this, sometimes it gets confusing, especially if you get a few hot pixels. That's one thing about doing a video. When I was setting my exposure here, I was trying to make sure that it wasn't real grainy and stuff, because I wasn't going to process each individual picture. When I did that 36-minute long thing, I think I had 541 frames, and I knew I didn't want to try to process all of them separately. That would have taken forever. I'm sure there's some way, if you have the right software, that you can do it as a batch. Yeah, Vega's hiding right now, but you can see where the Big Dipper was, and then last night when it got really, really good, the Big Dipper was starting to get down lower here, where part of this was disappearing behind the tree. Go back here to about 400. I think this here's a nice little happy medium for my sky anyway. That's one thing too, when you're doing something like this, you really need to base it on the conditions that you have at that moment. You might have, okay, tonight we had a crescent moon. It was a few days old, but it's disappeared. It might be completely below the horizon by now, but when I came out here, I could just see it above the trees. Would have been over here someplace. So that might be why it's a little brighter over here too. Maybe it's way down low. But so if the moon's up, you might find that you have to use considerably lower exposure and gain, and the same if you have issues with street lights or anything like that, just depending on where you live. But this is a good starting point for me, living in a nice dark area. Now, another interesting thing I found from using this was it kind of helped me confirm what part of my sky was more affected by light pollution. Because for me, okay, I'm supposed to be Bortle 4, that's what an app I found says. But if I start going north towards town, it doesn't take long to get into Bortle 5 and 6, and then downtown Terre Haute's Bortle 7. I guess, if you want to get into 8s and 9s, you got to get into really big cities. But Terre Haute's like 50, 60,000 people, and I'm like maybe 14, 15 miles from downtown. So I had noticed before, sometimes if I was imaging something, let's say, well, one of the things I'd done for it's Pleiades, let's say I waited till it got above the trees and I taken images and everything's looking happy, and then of course as I get here to where I'm up to its highest point, since I've got a German equatorial type mount, I have to do the meridian flip as they call it, because my stuff's starting to run into the mount. So then I have to change and put the weights on the opposite side of the mount, and of course the camera on the opposite side. So see, I'd start off here going from east to west. The camera is on the east side, kind of facing west, and then it gets confusing. It's facing back east. Anyway, it's going to run into it, so you have to flip it around and get it so that you've got room to do the other half of the sky. And well, then I'd notice as I'd start getting over in here, the sky was brighter, because on a really dark night where it was really good, I'd notice straight up the sky seemed jet black sometimes, and then as I'd get closer to the horizon in some areas it was more gray. And I noticed it over here too. So if I'm photographing something really faint and I start getting over here, the pictures aren't quite as good. Now if I use some kind of light pollution filter, or like if you're using narrow band, either like one of these extreme L filters or whatever they call them, there's several different brands, or if you have O3 or hydrogen alpha filter or something, you might be able to completely counteract that and not worry about it. But if you just are going basically filterless, it makes a big difference. So this kind of really helped confirm it. So up here, I've got the town of Riley, and then actually on a few miles ahead of that is some of the east side of Terre Haute and the airport. And then as I get over here on the western half of the sky, there's, at least for the first few miles as I look out to the west, if I go driving out there, it's just country. But if I drive out to, like say, a mile or so down the road to an area where I don't have all the trees in the way, I can see the light glow along the northern horizon. And the city of Terre Haute, it'll be really bright here down on the low part. And you can really tell how much of a difference it is, you know, from out there to there. So that's one of the things, if you're, especially if you're going on vacation. I remember one of the Facebook groups, some guy lived in, I don't know, some big city. He lived around Pittsburgh or Philadelphia or wherever, but he dealt with a lot of light pollution. And he said he was going on vacation to some place like that was a border 4 sky, and he was wondering if he should take his light pollution filter with him. And some people were saying, don't mess with it, you won't need it. I thought, well, I'll at least mention it to him. You know, and I just told him that, you know, my sky's border 4, and at least part of the sky, the filter would help. So I'm like, hey, that filter doesn't take up much room, it doesn't weigh nothing, it might be worth it to take it just in case, because when they measure these Bortle numbers, I think what they're doing is looking straight up. Because I know, I've heard of people, they've got these sensors where they can measure the faintest magnitude, like, and they say, oh, well, your sky can get to magnitude 20 or something on your photography. And that's, of course, based on how dark your sky is and how clear it is, too, at the time, I think. But it doesn't really take into account that you might have a town 5 or 10 miles, 15 miles away that's affecting part of your sky. So here's an image I took several months ago, and let's see, it's, I think Cassiopeia and M31 are in it at some point. I might have to dig around and find them, but I'd stacked several. You can see here, there's some streaks. So I took a bunch of 30-second photographs, and I think I had my gain set at 100, and I took a dark frame or two and just stacked them and processed them, and gives you an idea. You know, I couldn't get it perfect. Some of it down here looks kind of smeary. Over here's Vega, and then you can see a little parallelogram of Lyra. Let's see. Okay, well, this is Cassia. Or not Cassia. This is the Northern Cross. So this would be Cygnus. So you get Deneb, and then it forms like the handle of the cross and comes down here. There's a lot of really good Milky Way there. The North American Nebula and the Pelican Nebula are right around in there. As you can see, my focus isn't quite right. That's something good to show you while I'm playing around. This is kind of donut looking. There's a dark spot in here, and I didn't realize it at the time. I thought, well, it is what it is. And I thought that, you know, if stars were looking kind of bloated, that it was probably because my exposure was cranked up a little, which can do it, and if you stretch them too much, it could too. But when I got my focus improved, I got rid of these little donut black dots. Let's see, I've got another picture. It says Cassiopeia and M31. Well, this is what happens when you can see so many stars that it's hard to identify some of them. This here is the Great Square of Pegasus. I paused to try to figure this out. And You get some bright stars, you go off and you kind of turn this direction, and that is M31. And Cassiopeia should be right over here. I think that's the double cluster right there. And sometimes if I'm out here on a really dark night and I'm trying to find M31, it's easy to look up and see that. And if you don't have your bearings right, you might wonder if you're seeing M31. So here's a little Starlink pass I made. If you've ever, it's kind of streaked there, but if you could actually see it when they were coming over naked eye, you could tell that they all looked like little bitty tiny individual stars. And that part right up there is also another part of Starlink, because there's just tons of them out there. But there happened to be a good pass that night, and it was going high overhead. And this camera was really nice for that. You could do the same thing with the space station or whatever. But I know a lot of people that are into astrophotography hate Starlink, but this is cool to see. I know it can be annoying if it's messing up your picture. It goes right through the middle of it. But I remember I was laughing when I saw this, because I thought, if somebody didn't know what they were looking at, they might actually think that was a flying saucer or something, because it looked almost like each little star could be windows in a spaceship or a plane or something. So I got a kick out of that. I thought that really could freak somebody out, and they think they saw a UFO. See here, this one's supposed to be yet another Starlink. See something there? It looks like a cloud almost, and that may be it coming up. When I first saw Starlink coming up, I knew when it was gonna be up, because they were talking about it on the news, and they said where to look. It said, you know, it's coming from one part of the sky to another. When I first started seeing it come above the trees, before it was really bright and high in the sky, it looked almost like a little jet stream, you know, like the exhaust from an airplane that got left floating around. But then I noticed it was moving. Oh, there it is right now. I can see. So this here was one where they were spread out more. So instead of seeing a pack of 40 or 50 of them in a really tiny area, this little thing back, I don't know if that's a streak of light from the moon being really low in the sky, or maybe Venus or Jupiter was right below the trees or what. But of course, to actually see this stuff, it needs to be obviously dark, but it also needs to be near sunrise or sunset, because you're seeing the sunlight reflecting off of these things. So if they happen to make a pass at 3 a.m., they're there. They might be straight overhead, but since the sun's on the other side of the earth, nothing's illuminating them, so you won't see them. And it's the same with if the moon happens to be getting brighter, because I think one time when these happened, I saw them really good, and a few days later they came over again, but we were approaching full moon, and even though according to all the statistics they were just as bright, they were like barely visible or not visible at all. Well, here it is back to the live view. I guess the northern lights aren't going to do much anything tonight unless they happen to pop up for a few minutes. I guess that's kind of fortunate that I had it just happened to be recording. And of course I started around 11:30 or so. I waited until the moon was getting low. Maybe it was, it may have been a little better earlier, but the forecast was for it to possibly happen as good as last night. But when I saw a map, it looked like Indiana might not get it. I mean, last night was just ridiculously lucky to have something like that. And then fortunately, I had played around with this camera and realized that I might be able to do it. And it turned out to be a lot easier for me, because if I had been out, you know, I could have tried to do it with a wide angle lens and a DSLR and just take pictures and try variety of exposures and then process them and hope, and I probably would have got something. But since I was doing this live view, I was able to really get it to where I felt quite nice. And fortunately, I was out here at the time when it got real active, and I think it had actually got really active before, because I didn't get out here till like 1 in the morning. So I'd heard it was going to peak around 2 a.m. and I just kind of fell asleep in front of the TV for a little bit, and I woke up and looked at my phone, and one of my friends that lives up closer to town was posting pictures that they took with their nice cell phone. They had like an iPhone or something. My cheap $99 phone does not get pictures of this stuff, but hers, she had really good pictures, just handheld out in the yard, and there was all kinds of bright red. I'm like, man, you better get up, wake up, and get out there. And when I first started setting up, I wondered, like, well, maybe I missed it, and I was hoping that I was going to get to see them. So tonight, I suppose I could have actually gone ahead and imaged something else. Last night, I wouldn't have been able to do anything else. There was so much of that. I mean, if the moon was out, I could have took pictures of it. So let's say I was going to do a time lapse of the sky. Let's say you just wanted to watch the stars travel across the sky over an hour or several hours or whatever. I was thinking about this because I'd mentioned before how much data it took me to make that video. When I recorded for 36 minutes, I had like 9.7 gigabytes, and those were, I took like 540 pictures or something like that, and each one was around 6 megabytes. But I was thinking if I did 30-second exposures, which on a tripod is the maximum I should be able to get away with and not streak up the stars, that means I would get 2 per minute, so that's 120 per hour, and 12 times 6, 72, so it should be 720. Hang on, Mr. Calculator. So if it's 120 per hour, times 6 megabytes per picture. So I turned on my flashlight there. So it's 720 megabytes per hour. That's really not bad. If I wanted to go, say, 6 hours, make a big night of it. 4,320 megabytes, so close to 4 gigabytes. That's doable. But I would have been, since a little over a half an hour gave me almost 10 gigabytes, I would be looking at nearly 20 gigabytes per hour to do this, and that's at this raw 8 setting. If I was trying to do something at 16-bit, it would double it to 12 megabytes per picture, and then I'd have to go through all the extra processing. So then I'd be using, 20 gigabytes per hour, and the little video I played you that lasted a little over a minute. The finished size of that, I think, was only 40 megabytes. Yeah, 40.1 megabytes. So I took almost 10 gigabytes worth of data and made a 40 gigabyte video. But that's just the way it works. I mean, if you're doing planetary imaging or whatever, if you listen to the stories a lot of people tell you about what they create, some people that have a lot bigger computers, newer computers and all that, they talk about using hundreds of gigabytes of data, to get a picture and to get a laugh out of it. If you got the equipment, just do it. And you got to decide whether you keep all of it or not. Let's see here. What can I show you for a second? There's Vega. There's a little parallelogram that makes the constellation Lyra. Right over here, this is the Keystone. I think it looks kind of like a soft drink cup or something. It's a red Solo cup, I guess. And M13 is either right there or right there. I always forget which side it's on, but it lines up in the lines and it's up close to the wide opening. And then the whole constellation comes out. Something like that, I guess. I guess there's belts there or something. I don't know all of it. But this is also kind of an interesting way to learn the sky because it's easier to see stars that are harder to see. It's like some nights, Vega, of course, is always easy to see, but sometimes this little parallelogram's not that easy for me to see. Other times it shows right up. Part of it might be because my eyes aren't as young as they used to be, but depending on what part of the sky it's in, those might be a little challenging to see. So anyway, unless it happens to pop up some more activity while I've still got this turned on, I guess this will be the end of this video. So hopefully you got something good out of it to help you learn something.